After 35, insulin sensitivity declines roughly 1 to 2% every year, which means the breakfast that was metabolically fine at 35 is doing something measurably different in your body at 55. 7 swaps account for that shift. Most standard nutrition advice still does not. After 50, your body handles carbohydrates differently than it did at 35, and the foods you were told were safe are often the first problem. Insulin sensitivity can decline roughly 1 to 2% per year after 50, which means the same breakfast that was fine a decade ago now sends glucose higher and keeps it there longer. None of this requires medication to manage. It requires knowing which 7 levers actually move the needle, starting with the one most people eat for breakfast. Most commercial granola sits at a glycemic index of 65 to 70. Plain rolled oats score around 55. The difference is not the oat itself. It is the honey, maple syrup, brown sugar, and dried fruit manufacturers add, pushing sugar content to 12 to 16 grams per small 45-gram serving. Pour twice the serving, which most people do without realizing it, and the glycemic load triples. The swap is direct: 2 soft-boiled eggs alongside half a cup of plain rolled oats cooked in water. The eggs deliver roughly 12 grams of protein. Research published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that eating protein before or alongside carbohydrates measurably attenuates the postprandial glucose rise. The oats provide beta-glucan-soluble fiber, which slows gastric emptying. You keep the familiar bowl, you remove the spike, but the reason this works goes deeper than just fiber, and that is where Swap 2 becomes surprising. The order you eat food in changes how high glucose climbs, and this is not a wellness trend. A 2025 Stanford study tested what happened when participants ate pea fiber powder or boiled egg white protein 10 minutes before a rice meal. Both the fiber group and the protein group showed a measurably lower glucose spike than the group who ate rice alone. Fat, consumed 10 minutes before rice, delayed the peak rather than lowering it. The mechanism is physiology. Protein and soluble fiber slow gastric emptying, meaning glucose enters the bloodstream more gradually and the pancreas has more time to respond. The practical swap is sequencing, not restriction. Start any carbohydrate-containing meal with a handful of salad leaves, a spoonful of Greek yogurt, or 2 to 3 bites of chicken. The carbohydrates you plan to eat stay on the plate. They just arrive second. And arriving second, it turns out, is most of the work. What happens after the meal, though, is Swap 3. Before the remaining 5 swaps, one mechanism deserves a full sentence. After menopause, declining estrogen is directly associated with measurable reductions in insulin sensitivity. A 2025 study comparing 948 women found that early menopausal women had significantly higher rates of insulin resistance, with no clinical diagnosis and no obvious warning signs. For men, gradual testosterone decline after 50 is also associated with reduced glucose metabolism efficiency. Both sexes lose skeletal muscle with age, and muscle is the primary tissue that clears glucose from the blood after eating. Harvard-affiliated Brigham and Women's Hospital dietitian Nancy Oliveira notes that when cells cannot use insulin efficiently, blood sugar rises higher and stays elevated longer. The American Diabetes Association recommends screening all adults 35 and older for prediabetes at least every 3 years using a hemoglobin A1C test. Knowing your number is not optional context. It determines which of these swaps matter most for your specific biology. Swap 3 works regardless of where you sit on that range. Walking after eating is the most robustly evidenced lifestyle intervention for flattening postprandial glucose in this age group. A 2023 meta-analysis published in Sports Medicine, conducted by Engeroff, Gronberg, and Wilke at Goethe University Frankfurt, found that exercise had a greater acute beneficial impact on post-meal blood glucose when performed after eating rather than before. A separate 2022 meta-analysis found that 2 to 5 minutes of light-intensity walking every 20 to 30 minutes during prolonged sitting significantly lowered post-meal blood glucose levels. The mechanism is mechanical. contracting leg muscles act as a glucose sink independent of insulin signaling. This matters specifically after 50, because insulin-independent glucose uptake by muscle is one of the few pathways that does not degrade with age in the same way. The swap is a 10-minute walk within 30 minutes of finishing your largest meal. Not a workout, not a brisk pace, a deliberate stroll. What you drink with that meal, though, is swap 4. Orange juice has a glycemic index of approximately 50. A whole orange sits at 35. The difference is fiber. Blending or juicing severs the cellular structure of fruit, removing the physical barrier that slows glucose absorption in the gut. A 240 milliliter glass of orange juice delivers the sugar of 3 to 4 oranges with none of the intact fiber matrix. CGM data from the SHA 2019 study of 153 non-diabetic participants found that individuals over 60 had a mean average glucose of 104 milligrams per deciliter, higher than all younger age groups, and that breakfast produced the highest postprandial glucose concentrations of the day. Liquid carbohydrates at breakfast are therefore the highest risk moment in the day for this age group. The swap is direct. Eat the whole fruit, drink water, or unsweetened tea. If texture is the issue, a small handful of blueberries stirred into plain yogurt delivers polyphenols, fiber, and a glucose curve that stays flat. The next swap addresses what happens at lunch when bread appears. White sandwich bread has a glycemic index of approximately 71, placing it in the high GI category. Traditional sourdough made with long fermentation sits closer to 53 to 54. Whole grain rye scores around 40 to 50 depending on preparation. The difference is acetic acid produced during fermentation, which slows gastric emptying by the same mechanism as vinegar, and the intact fibrous bran structure in rye, which physically impedes amylase enzymes from accessing starch. A 2025 Stanford study observed that participants who spiked hardest to bread were more likely to have hypertension, suggesting that the bread response is a window into broader metabolic status, not just a carbohydrate number. The swap requires reading one thing on a bread label. Look for the word whole as the first ingredient, and look for a short ingredient list. If it contains more than 5 ingredients, it has been sufficiently processed to negate most of the benefit. Swap 6 addresses the hidden spike that occurs before food even reaches the table. Swap 6 is vinegar, and the evidence is specific. Several small clinical studies, reviewed in Clinical Nutrition ESPN in 2024, found that acetic acid in vinegar improves glucose metabolism acutely when consumed with carbohydrate-rich meals. The mechanism is gastric emptying. Acetic acid slows the rate at which food moves from the stomach into the small intestine, spreading the glucose absorption window. Using 2 teaspoons of apple cider vinegar in a salad dressing or diluted in water before a starchy meal is the practical application. Swap 7 is the one most people resist: sleep. Chronic sleep disruption elevates cortisol, which directly raises fasting blood sugar. After 50, sleep architecture changes, with reduced deep sleep stages and more frequent nocturnal waking, making sleep quality a primary but underappreciated metabolic variable. The NHS recommends 7 to 9 hours for adults. The compounding effect of combining all 7 swaps is not additive, it is structural. Each one addresses a different point in the glucose pathway, so the curve does not just dip, it flattens across the whole day.